What's your name?
My name is Bob Quinn.
Um, what year did you move or were you born in Old Orchard Beach?
What year did I move or was born?
Yeah.
Okay. I was born in Biddeford, but I've lived in Old Orchard Beach since I was born in 1938.
Thank you.
How old does that make me, Jake?
You are. Oh,
Wait, what was the year?
this is 1938. 80.
73?
I'd like to be, Maddie.
78.
Huh?
78.
You're getting closer.
Are you like 82?
Whoa, not quite. I am 81.
81.
Oh my
81.
gosh, that's close.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes.
What town do they live in right now?
They live in, both of them live in Florida. One of them is in a town called Gulfport, and the other one is in a town called Ocala. Excuse me, not Ocala, Ocoee.
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 Where have you lived?
Where have I lived in Old Orchard Beach?
Or just like anywhere?
Well, all of it has been here, okay? 4 different locations here, but all in Old Orchard Beach except for the time I was in the service.
Where were you stationed when you were in service?
When I was stationed in the service, I was in New York City and in Germany, Heidelberg, Germany. Childhood in Old Orchard Beach was I think, very comfortable, very secure. For me, I grew up in the more rural area at that time, Saco Avenue. You're all familiar with where Saco Avenue is. But I grew up in the halfway section, down at the southern end of town, and there was a lot of room to play. Had a lot of friends around. When I first, my first few years, it was kind of, I was by myself. But then after World War II ended, the Stone Village, I don't know if any of you are familiar where the Stone Village is, Potman's Market. Across the street from that, all those stone houses were built, which is right in the area that I lived in. And so I had kids to play with and friends, and that was nice. We had Wild Acres. You
Yeah.
all familiar with
I
Wild
live
Acres?
right
Well,
across.
at that time, it was kind of a sleepy place. There was a farmhouse there, and some cottages, pretty basic cabins kind of built out of slabs. And the rest of it was all woods all the way to Temple Avenue.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
if you
live
know where Temple Avenue is. So, yeah, and we used to play cowboys in there and Indians, and we had the run of the whole place most of the time, except in the summer there were a few people around, but nothing like how it's built up today. So that was nice. We played baseball on a street that was unpaved, and if an occasional car came along, we'd just pick up our bases and let them go through and then go on with the game.
Yeah.
So it was very comfortable.
What was your favorite childhood experience in OOB?
Favorite childhood experience? I think maybe what I said about, getting out and playing with my friends and having a good time and being lucky to be in a caring family. I was the oldest, and I was an only child until I was 12 years old. My 2 brothers are quite a bit younger than I am.
Favorite memory of OOB?
My favorite memory of OOB? I have to think about that a little bit, Jake. I think that probably the memories I had downtown of being able to go down there, we were, I think, a lot freer than you kids are today as far as what we could do. I could get on my bike when I was, 12 years old, and I could ride downtown from the halfway with my friends. We could go on the amusements and ride back home, and those were good memories.
Did you go through the OOB school system?
I went through the Old Orchard Beach school system through the 8th grade, and in high school, I went to a Catholic high school in Biddeford called St. Louis High School.
What do you remember about going to school here?
What do I remember about going to school here? Well, back then, as Maddie said, in the area she grew up in is where I started school on School Street. I'm sure that you're familiar with where School Street is. We had two schools there. One of them was the original Old Orchard Beach High School. That's a senior center now, senior citizens housing there on the right-hand side. The smaller building was to the right. And then the bigger building to the left. And when I started school in the kindergarten, it was the kindergarten was down in the cellar, and we used to have kind of air raid type of thing where we had to vacate the school in a hurry, so we had to go out the cellar windows and get out of the school. I remember that. I remember the quaintness of the high school side of it, where I was in the 3rd grade. I was there. There were just 4 rooms in that building, and there was up in the upper level. There were one room was at a lower level than the other. There was a few more steps to go up there. I remember that, and I also remember getting in trouble once because we were going down the stairs. I was in the 4th grade, and I could see my teacher's slip hanging from her below her dress, and I said, "Miss Margoni, I see your slip hanging." So I got in a little trouble there. I can remember that. And before that year was over, they opened the federal school during World War II. A lot of people were moving to Old Orchard Beach into temporary housing, especially in the campground area. And the town had to build a new school. It was built like a chicken coop. It was alongside here where the parking area is, on the other side of the building here. And it had a hallway down the center and rooms on either side. It was a very basic school. I remember going there through the 7th grade, and then in the 8th grade they built a high school annex that had, I think, 4 classrooms in it, and that's where the 8th grade was at the time. So that's my experiences there. I also remember going, I had to be school bused to school because I lived in the halfway. So I can remember one time the school bus was broken. It was a private contractor there. It wasn't town-owned school buses. So the private contractor's bus was broken down that morning, and his son, who was studying to be an attorney at the time, helped out getting us kids to school, and he came in a Model A Ford coupe that had a rumble seat in the back. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Instead of a trunk, the back of the car opened up and there was a rumble seat there. So he stopped to pick us up, and he said, "Okay, all the girls inside the car, all the boys stand back in the rumble seat." So we went down Saco Avenue standing up in the rumble seat. I lost my hat. I got heck from that from my mother, but I didn't know I was going to be out in the open in that rumble seat. But it was a fun thing, you know, for kids to be able to do that. So I remember that memory. That couldn't happen today. Society is a lot more regulated, so they wouldn't be allowed to pick you guys up and put you in your case, Jake, in the back of the rumble seat, and pick the girls up and put them in the front of the car. It just wouldn't happen today. So that's a fond memory of one of my fond memories of school here. I can go on and on about this, but you have 17 more questions at least, probably.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1956. Old Orchard Beach is, well, I had a paper route growing up. It was the evening paper, and I delivered all through the halfway section. So that really, I guess, was my first job. That taught me a lot of responsibility. I had to pay the bill for the papers, and I had to collect the money, and I had to keep track of Maddie's parents didn't pay me on the due date, so I had to make a note of that and make sure I knocked in on their door and collected their money the next time I went around, or the next time I could catch them. So there was a lot of, it taught me a lot of responsibility in growing up. And then my first job, other than that, was washing dishes at a restaurant on East Grand Avenue. What was my first pay? Okay, when I delivered papers, newspapers, I got a penny and a half per paper. That was my profit margin on that paper. Papers then sold for 5 cents. So when I went to work, I can't recall, Jake, specifically, but probably it was in the area of 20 or 25 cents an hour.
What did you have in town?
In town, in Old Orchard, other than the restaurant job, I was a bellhop. I don't know if any of you are familiar with what a bellhop is. Well, we had hotels in town at that time, and what bellhops did was take the bags of the people coming checking in to the hotel. We'd take their bags up to their room, and that job was based on tips. What you made was what you got for tips on that job. Then beyond that, I didn't have jobs right here in town. I had my own business in town here.
What was that business?
That business was a bicycle shop. That's what I did most of my life, ran a bicycle shop.
Any stories about the history of Old Orchard Beach that you experienced that you would like to share with us?
Stories about Old Orchard. What kind of stories are you?
Just like any story.
Anything.
Like any cool story that
Any
happened.
cool story that, okay. Well, I can talk about a story of, on the corner down here where the fire station is now, was a farm when I was growing up. And I think I mentioned earlier that I was allowed to ride my bike down here at a pretty young age, but there were bulls in that on that farm, and the fence went right out to Saco Avenue. So I was always told that if I wore red, the bull might attack me. So my mother would say, "Are you going downtown beyond Union Avenue?" And if I said yes, she'd check me out and make sure I didn't wear anything red. I guess that's a story. I get a lot of stories. I served on the Old Orchard Beach Town Council, and I could tell stories about that too, but that's probably not the type of story you want to hear. Our town is rich in history. I think probably you realize that already. It's got a lot of uniqueness to it, and stories that could be told about things that happen here that are pretty intriguing.
Affected by it in any way?
I didn't hear the first part of it, Jake.
Are there any stories about the? Oh wait, no. What are some things in Old Orchard Beach that drastically changed throughout your time living here? And have you been affected by it in any way?
Okay, things that have drastically, is that the word you used, drastically changed here during my time? Well, I think during my time, and this doesn't apply only to Old Orchard, but to our culture, our society in general, that things are much more structured now than they were back then. As an example of that, we have more government in our face today than we did back then. And if you wanted, back in not only in my youth, but in the early days here in town, if you wanted to build a garage, you just went out, bought the building materials and built it. Today you're subjected to a lot of regulation. First thing you have to do is go down to the town hall, get a permit to do that. You have to wait until that's approved. It might have to go before the planning board, or the zoning board, whatever you might do. You didn't have any of that structure back then. There was a lot less government. So I think that drastically changed the way we do things today. That's one example. How's that?
Catastrophic events in Oahu, and has it affected you in any way?
Have I been a witness to, huh? I don't think I can say I've been a witness to, but I've, been cognizant of some things that happened here, especially during my time on the town council.
As an adult.
I think I've always been comfortable here. I know at one point in my life, we were looking for new housing, and we looked outside of the town of Old Orchard Beach and in the nearby communities, Scarborough, Saco, Biddeford. But the bottom line of it all was that I guess I wasn't fully on board of any house we looked at, that I would say, gee, I'll be comfortable here. My wife had a hard time understanding that because she's not from Old Orchard Beach. She's from Brunswick. It's a town about 35, 40 miles from here. So, but she went along with it. I was fortunate in that respect.
During World War II,
Yes.
what was it like?
Well, I was quite young then, all right? The war was from 41 to 45. I was born in 38, so you can imagine I was 3 years old when the war broke out. Don't remember that. My longest memory back, this is a good question. I'm glad Maddie talked you into it, or you talked her into it. I don't know which way it went, but anyway. My oldest memory back is growing up on Saco Avenue, a main thoroughfare in the town, and I was out there playing in the yard by myself. I didn't have any friends at the time because there was kind of no houses around. So I was out there playing in the yard, and a car went by honking its horn, and so I guess I didn't think too much of it. And the next maybe 5-10 minutes later, another car went by honking its horn. Just no traffic, he just honking his horn. It must have been him. There weren't many women that drove back then, but honking his horn. So I ran into my mother and I said, "What's going on?" There's 2 cars that went by and they're honking their horns. So she said, I just heard on the news, on the radio, no TV back then, on the radio that World War II was over. So that was the longest memory back I have of the war. It's a happy memory because it's the end of the war. That night we had friends that lived, my parents had friends that lived on Saco Avenue down beyond the sandwich shop, down towards the middle of town here. And we walked down there that night to be with them, and there were people, happy. Everybody's going by, honking their horns, hollering, waving, and all of that. And we went downtown, and they were rolling barrels, 55-gallon drum barrels down Old Orchard Street, all part of the joy. And some damage was done to some of the amusements. People got pretty rowdy at that time. I don't know if there was drinking then, but anyway, probably. But they had to close some of the amusements because of the rowdiness. But it was kind of a happy memory. We sat on their steps, their front steps, which were right close to the sidewalk on Saco Avenue down there, and we became part of the joy of it all. That was the end of the World War II, and that's about all I can tell you about it, because at that point I was not quite 7 years old. Before I answer that, can I go back to the previous question? Is it all right? I just want to make one other comment about that experience during the the end of World War II was probably something unique that happened here in Old Orchard because of the nature of the town being a recreation area. And this was in the summertime. This was in August. So I guess I enjoyed a unique experience that if I had lived in Biddeford, for example, or Portland, I wouldn't have had. So that's it. And then the question, my favorite place to hang out. I wasn't much of a hanger-outer, We just did things as kids, and we didn't have the electronic devices. We didn't have TV. We we played together, and those were, you know, we did things like play games, board games, Monopoly, for example. We'd have it at your house tonight, Jake, and tomorrow night we'd go over to Maddie's, and, you know, we'd all get together and have those kind of experiences. So I guess those were kind of hangouts, you know, but
Yeah.
not a commercial hangout.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite thing to do in OOB now?
Do I have a favorite thing to do in OB now? Well, I'm active in my church. I enjoy doing that. I enjoy biking. So those are a couple of favorite things. It's all out at the end of the pier called the casino, and that was the end of the pier. That's going back into the 40s and 50s when the big band era. I don't know how much of the history of the town you guys have studied, but or looked at, but they get big name bands here to play on the pier, as well as across the street, not across the street, but on West Grand Avenue, a place called the Palace. But the pier back then was, after the big band era was over, there were different things out there, an arcade, and I can't remember, there was nothing that I particularly related to, but that's my memory of the pier. That was less of a drinking atmosphere out there than it is today. But and the right-hand side as you walk out onto the pier was pretty much open. Today, a lot more of that is closed in. That's it. It still had kind of the flavor that it has today.
What was your favorite thing to do on the pier?
Ring toss. You know what ring toss is?
Yes.
You do, Brianna. I saw you shaking your head that way.
Is it the thing with like the rings and you toss
Yeah,
it onto
yeah,
the bottles?
yeah, that's what it is, and
Yeah.
you could play until you won, and you know, I could always go home and say, hey, look what I got down there, you know.
Yeah. To any of the concerts? Did you ever go to any of the concerts at the ballpark or pier?
When it was here, I went to one.
Whose concert did you go to?
I can't remember because I'm not into that kind of thing, but my wife was the ticket manager at the ballpark, so you know, I could pretty much go whenever I want, but I went with a niece. She wanted to see a concert, so I took her to the concert.
Were you here when the famous big bands played?
I was here, but I didn't participate because that was happening in the 40s and 50s during the years I was growing up. Because I don't dance, I don't even like to dance, so I guess it didn't have a lot of appeal to me.
Yeah. Did you ever see any of the horse races at the kite track?
No. No, I never did. I know where it is. Excuse me. And it was, I think, during the, and you guys probably studying the history of this town know the year closer than I do, but it seems like sometimes in the 50s that closed. I think I was in high school at the time that closed. And no, I never did see a race there. I know it was supposedly the fastest track in the country.
To visit OOB?
No, I don't think I have. No. As part of my business here, we did bike rentals, and we did business with the Bushes down there in Kennebunkport, and we also rented bikes to Paul Newman, the actor. I got to meet him, but he wasn't here in Oahu. He was in Proud's Neck, and some of you may not be familiar with that. It's a section of Scarborough. So those are the couple of famous people that I got to meet, but as a result of having a business here in Oahu, but not people who were vacationing in Oahu or had specific ties to our town. The what railroad?
The dummy railroad.
Oh, the dummy railroad. Not when it was in operation. I might be old, Jake, but not that old. But my father would take us down, Ocean Park, Bayview, down towards Camp Ellis, and you could see the ties, the railroad ties that were still out in the water there that were from that. He'd talk about it because he had memories of it, but the train was long gone before I was born. What did you say at the beginning? I didn't catch it.
Were you on the beach when any of the planes landed on the beach?
Well, they had the fly-in recently. Are you talking about that?
No, like.
Or are you going way back
Way
into
back.
the beginning years of?
Like when there was an airport down there.
Yeah, Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I wasn't, that was before my time, but what is interesting about it is that my father had a great interest as a kid. He grew up in Biddeford, but coming down here to that hangar, down there on East Grand Avenue, on the beach down there, and Jones and all of that, he had a great interest in it. He'd talk about that, but that was back in the infancy of the flying machines. How did I spend my birthdays in Old Orchard Beach? Getting a year older. But I had, when I was a kid, my folks had parties, and also all my friends could come over, and that's what we did mainly. I can't recall going away to anything special, but it was at home that we celebrated the birthday parties. At one of these parties, and it had to be after the end of World War II, but I can recall that a jet flew over, and that was one of the first times we saw a jet, and it leaves a stream, as you know, and we were all mesmerized by that. Everything stopped, and we looked up and watched the jet stream until it left. And so that's one memory I have of one of those birthday parties.
Did you go to any of the dances in the ballroom?
No. Don't dance? Don't like to dance? You mean growing up? Is that what you're talking about, those years? Or yeah, there were quite a few, and when I'd go down with my folks, I ate at the restaurants there. I can't tell you any specifics of it, but there were more. Back then, there was less of what I guess we could call fast food today. It was more like sit-down restaurants, like the Captain's Galley up here. What's it called now? Something different. But
Duffy's.
right. Yeah, there were more of them downtown, and I remember that we ate at them. So, that's something. Unlike dancing, I always enjoyed eating out. It was a fun thing. About anything that isn't on the list, I can expound on that a little bit probably, but I think we covered a lot of things, and I think you got somewhat of a feeling of how I felt about especially about growing up in Old Orchard Beach.
Thank you.
I think I love the town, and I think I still enjoy it. I still like to be actively involved in town and do things that are town-sponsored. I think that's good. That gives us all, and you kids ought to have that in your blood, that gives a sense of community that we need to be involved here in any way that we can. And you are, by being in school here, involved in a lot of facets of the community, which is good.
Thank you for coming today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been fun. I enjoyed it.